Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Even if people manage to get offloaded into Emerge, there's often nowhere for them to go. We've got over 20% or 700 frail seniors sitting in acute care beds waiting for long-term care. Last spring, a vice president of the Nova Scotia Health Authority noted that the ambulance and emergency care problem is compounded by the lack of long-term care beds. He said, there are an increasing number of individuals who need housing or accommodation or long-term care, but their needs are becoming very complicated, and it's very challenging for us to find locations for them to go. And I will table that. Mr. Speaker, this sounded to me like an acknowledgement that any changes to ambulance offload directives without sufficient funding for personnel is just window dressing until the very serious shortage of long-term care beds can be addressed. Mr. Speaker, will the minister acknowledge that there is a connection between the shortage of long-term care beds and the worsening situation and backlog in the emergency departments in Nova Scotia?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the member for the question. The member raises a concern that we're well aware of for Nova Scotians. I believe everyone in this legislature recognizes the importance of ensuring that the appropriate care, whether that's in our primary acute care system or in our long-term continuing care environment for Nova Scotians to receive the supports that they require. And that, Mr. Speaker, is why we continue. The member made reference to the offloads and being only one part of the work that needs to be done. That's true, Mr. Speaker. That's why the Nova Scotia Health Authority is also continuing the work looking at patient flow throughout the hospital system, Mr. Speaker, to improve those processes. And it's why, Mr. Speaker, we've announced, I believe, over 120 some new long-term care beds, Mr. Speaker. We continue to work and invest in home care programs and other programs, Mr. Speaker, to allow Nova Scotians to stay where they want to and continue care space.
The Honourable Member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One of the things I've gotten used to over the last couple of years is that announcing 120 new beds when you need at least 2,000 doesn't reassure very many Nova Scotians. Mr. Speaker, the simple fact of the matter is that this government has had oversight of this matter for over 6 years. And for those 6 years, issues around long-term care beds and ambulance availability have persisted. They've gotten worse under this government, and there is no way other to frame it. This is a crisis this government has denied, and it's a crisis this government has paid lip service to. So I'd like to ask the minister, considering that a couple of weeks ago I was in the Emerge with 2 people who attempted suicide and were sent home within 24 hours, why has the minister taken only minor steps to improve the number of long-term care beds in this province, and does he agree that this is having a dramatic impact on the health and home care for seniors in this province?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I guess you would rule perhaps that there's a disagreement of fact between myself and the member opposite, where she had suggested or stated that the wait times have only gotten worse under this government. In fact, Mr. Speaker, if the member wishes to compare the wait list for continuing care, long-term care services, when we came into government in 2013 and what they are today, Mr. Speaker, we've seen a reduction in the wait list of almost about 50%, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we've seen a reduction in the number of people waiting both in hospital, waiting to be discharged to a long-term care facility, as well as those people waiting in their home or in their community for long-term care accommodations. And Mr. Speaker, not just the number of people waiting, but how long they wait has also been reduced significantly.